Wow. Okay, today, in Deadline, they reported that Jay Stratton, who's the former head of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, right? It was a Pentagon office to study UAP, UFOs, right? Well, it's being reported that he's got a new bombshell memoir going to be coming out from the same publisher that produced Luis Elizondo's book and from the same guy who make that happen, Dan Farah. So we've got all the details. Let's jump in. And remember, I kind of covered this a little bit a week ago or so in another video. I'll put a link in the description. Eric Davis, the famous scientist, astrophysicist, spoke about a book from Jay Stratton that was going to be coming out. It has now been confirmed. It's out, y'all. This is great. So let's dive in, see what this is all about. All right, let's start first with a clip of Jay Stratton so you can see him, hear from him, get to know him a little bit. This is a clip from Weaponized, which is Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp's podcast. They were the first to really bring him out, do an interview, really prop him up, and props to them for doing that. Again, I'm liking Jay Stratton more and more and more, y'all. And this is great. So I'm going to play this clip. Now, it's not really off topic, but, again, it's just to give you an idea of who he is. But he's going to be talking about the religious aspect of UFOs and how some people in the government looked at the UAP phenomena as like demons and spirits. And we've talked about that a lot on this channel, right? So interesting idea, right? So here's the clip.
Was there any involvement? I've heard these stories from people we know about fundamentalist religious people, high ups, who were concerned about its demons or were messing with forces of biblical proportions.
There's absolutely some concern there. And I did see it in writing one time in my career where someone was asking me to push back because of their religious concerns. And you should waive off of this topic is literally what they were telling me. You shouldn't be involved in this. I know it exists. I think what my professional opinion is, after again years now of being involved, is that seems to have died off. I think now I'm elevated into that senior level, and a lot of my colleagues that were all at the same level that had grown up with me throughout the process, we don't really think that way, right? So I think kind of the old guard was moving out, the new guard was moving in, and it never once after that early DIA stuff, did it ever stop or get in the way. It was just early on when kind of that old guard's there and protecting their own, what they believe.
All right, so there you go. That's Jay Stratton. Great job by George Knapp with the interview there. But let's get to this bombshell article, right, of this bombshell memoir that's going to be coming out. What they didn't mention is when the book is coming out. So that I don't know, but let's get some details on Jay Stratton and his new book coming out. Right here, Deadline, HarperCollins, acquires rights to bombshell memoir from Jay Stratton, former director of U.S. government's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. Got a picture of him here. You've seen him on Skinwalker Ranch, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp's podcast, and many other things. So let's dive in here. Exclusive. HarperCollins imprint William Morrow has snapped up North American publishing rights to a new memoir from Jay Stratton, former director of the U.S. government's secretive UFO program, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, who led investigations into UAP and non-human intelligence for 16 years. Also, greatly enthused about this timely title is producer Dan Farah, Ready Player One, which has the rights to produce any television or film adaptation. Again, Dan Farah is the one who got Luis Elizondo his book deal. During his time working as a senior intelligence official, Stratton led countless investigations of UAP and non-human intelligence, including the now famous Tic Tac UAP encounter by Navy fighter pilots and the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group in 2004. While much of his work is classified, the memoir promises to reveal all that can be lawfully disclosed. Oh, God, I lost my place. Providing a first-hand account of the shocking discoveries, challenges, and breakthroughs that have marked the U.S. government's investigation and understanding of UAP and non-human intelligence, as well as the profound effects on Stratton and his family. Said Stratton, "We are at the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. The process of disclosure is complex, but it has begun." Yo. Stratton's memoir comes on the heels of the U.S. Senate's bipartisan UAP Disclosure Act, sponsored by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer from New York, Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota, Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand from New York, which proposes laws that would bring about public disclosure on what the U.S. government knows about UAP and non-human intelligence, which to me is the most important thing. Forget the UAP. Let me see the non-human intelligence, right? Senator Schumer has said that the American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. Stratton is the most senior former U.S. government official to go public about their direct involvement in the investigation of UAP and non-human intelligence. That is huge, y'all. I'm a big fan of Stratton, I got to admit. I haven't seen too much with him, because honestly, he hasn't done too much out there. He doesn't do podcast interviews, and he's not out there a lot. But the little I've seen of him and what I've heard about him, I like this guy a lot. And again, he's the most senior former U.S. government official to go public, right, about their direct involvement in the investigation of UAP and non-human intelligence. He's dedicated more time to UAP-related issues than any other government official, actively shaping and directing U.S. policy and investigation in this complex field. At the time of his retirement, he was the civilian equivalent rank of a two-star general or admiral, a level reached by less than 1% of all federal employees. He served the U.S. for over 32 years, both on the battlefield and as a senior member of the national intelligence community, actively contributing to the U.S. president's daily briefing on national security. Crazy, right? This guy is like not a nobody here. All right? This is huge, y'all. Specializing in conventional and emerging disruptive air and space technologies, Stratton's service included 8 deployments, with multiple in Iraq and Afghanistan, and time spent in the Army, Air Force, Naval Intelligence, and the Defense Intelligence Agency, where he was Chief of Air and Space Warfare in the Defense Warning Office. What? It was while serving as the Chief of Air and Space Warfare at the DIA that Stratton and his colleagues learned about the existence of UAP and related national security concerns. I'd be curious to know, who are those colleagues? Is it people we already know in the field? Is Lou Elizondo one of them? Hal Puthoff, Kit Green? Who are we talking about? Colm Kelleher, James Lakatsky. Okay. Oh, in response, they created the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program, OSAP as we know it, the first official U.S. government program to investigate UAP since the closure of the Air Force's Project Blue Book in 1969. OSAP was sponsored by then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and grew into ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. That's an interesting wording there, that OSAP grew into ATIP, because it's always been described, well, it's been described many ways, and I get it. It's got to be confusing for everybody at this point. But it was described that ATIP was like a smaller arm of OSAP. And then ATIP went on to become its own thing on top of that, which they were going to call ATIP 2.0. It does sound like there was two ATIPs, right? It's kind of like, you know what? This is what it is. It's kind of like you got a restaurant, right? And then you start doing like this little pop-up thing on the side, right? With a different name. But that starts to take off, right? And then you're like, oh, let's make that its own thing, right? And so you do, and you're like, do we call it the same thing? Let's call it that, but bigger or something, XYZ bar and restaurant or something. And you're like, well, let's drop all that. Just call it the same name, even though it's not the same thing, but it comes from the same place. I think that's what happened with ATIP and OSAP, right? That's helping me understand it a lot better, in my opinion. But either way, both programs were official, right? ATIP became its own thing. That's what the P in ATIP stands for, a program. So that's interesting. ATIP has been succeeded by a much larger and unprecedented whole-of-government interagency program to investigate UAP called the UAP Task Force. So basically, OSAP, they start working on a little thing called ATIP because it's a little more niche within OSAP, right? Then ATIP becomes its own thing. That turns into the UAP Task Force, and it becomes bigger, which Stratton covertly built for 2 years at the request of the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense. When forming the UAP Task Force, Stratton handpicked members from every agency within the intelligence community in each branch of the military. Among Stratton's handpicked team members was whistleblower David Grush, who testified under oath to Congress last year about technological and biological evidence of non-human intelligence. The Secretary of Defense announced the UAP Task Force in 2020, naming Stratton the program's director. So this is after 2017, right? This is after that bombshell New York Times article. All that comes out. 3 years later, they're announcing the UAP Task Force, and Jay Stratton becomes the program director, right? Don't hate me for saying this, but it's like Arrow with Sean Kirkpatrick, right? Now, granted, people have not liked Sean Kirkpatrick and Arrow, but it's essentially the same thing. Maybe they just took different routes. I don't know. Manager-producer Farrah of Farrah Films is known for his work on Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One, MTV's The Shannara, I don't know how to say that, Chronicles, and James Fox's much-discussed documentary, The Phenomenon, and in-depth primer on the subject of unidentified aerial phenomenon. Among his upcoming projects in the same vein is the series Secret Machines, based on the sci-fi thriller novels from A.J. Hartley and Tom DeLonge, which is in development at Legendary, as we were first to report. Also in the works is Armada, a feature adaptation of management client Ernest Cline's New York Times bestseller for Universal Pictures. And Ernest Cline wrote Ready Player One as well. But again, it's odd that they don't mention Luis Elizondo in here, in his helping with Luis Elizondo. I don't know. Interesting. Maybe that changed. I don't know. But, I mean, that's huge, y'all. Right? Let's look at that quote again from Stratton. We are at the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. The process of disclosure is complex, but it has begun. Again, the most senior person who's looked into UFOs to ever come out publicly, hitting a position in the government that less than 1% of federal employees accomplish. This guy is no joke. 8 deployments. I mean, look at presidential briefings. He brought in David Grush, right? Hand-picked team member, David Grush. So I don't think we'd have David Grush without Jay Stratton. That's what I think. So I'd be curious what y'all think in the comments about this. My video tomorrow is going to be about David Grush, and it's something I don't see anyone talking about. And it's going to be kind of crazy because it involves this paper. And you may be wondering, what? You'll find out tomorrow. Anyway, we'll see you guys on tomorrow's episode. It's going to be a great one, y'all. We're going to dive into David Grush again. It's been a while. And remember, I'm a huge fan of David Grush. I can't wait to make tomorrow's video. All right, y'all. That's it for today's video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace!
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.